Gentlemen, there's been talk of hybrid consoles in the next generation. In your opinion, what features could be offloaded to cloud and what would stay on the local machine? Thoughts on this one, Alex? I mean, we did an article in Eurogamer, and I'm looking at it right now. Dates back to 2013, and it's when Microsoft first came up with the power of the cloud concept. The idea that you could have cloud servers and the local hardware running in concert to produce, game-changing experiences. Those game-changing experiences never happened, simply because, well, if you've got a completely separate PC or compute unit located hundreds of miles away, you've got latency and bandwidth implications straight off the bat.
Yeah.
And, there's certain things, sort of deferred tasks that you could have the cloud do, possibly like lighting, some degree of lighting, possibly physics, possibly. I just don't really see this as being a foundational concept for a next generation console, though. I don't know what you think.
I'm just going to take from the things that I've seen exist and say maybe they're possible. So I'll say Flight Simulator 2020 maybe has some we can inference a bit there and say what that's doing, where there's far too much data there. They have an entire representation of the world with all these unique textures and unique buildings and things like that, which they procedurally scatter on top of, but a lot of that is too large, far too large. So they're streaming it in on demand if you have that option set up to get higher fidelity over your internet connection when you load up a new area of the world. Or I guess it can do it creeping, like if you go along the world at the flight path of like however kilometers an hour that is. So there's that idea. Like it could enable higher fidelity for ridiculously large worlds if you're streaming in things, as in more visual variation, because there's, just if these new Call of Duty games are already bajillion gigabytes and they're just like these like 2 maps or whatever, just think about think about that, and you can maybe enable that. And I think the other thing is you're doing a MMO or a large open world game. And even though for this large open world game thing, I think about I think it was you who said it last time. Like, do they actually is it really worth it to spin up all this processing time on the side just for like one random user? Is it really worth the amount of money you put in there?
Well, it's more to the point. What happens if you've got 200,000 users all demanding that resource simultaneously?
I don't know about that. Like, that's where it starts getting a little bit pie on the sky for me still. But you could have in like an MMO, I could see it in like a Star Citizen setting where they do this. That's the idea, is that like when you leave an area, the cloud runs simulation on it to when you return back to it. So that's different. And it's just not it's not like Starfield where you like go to an area and you would see it would be returned in its pristine state that you last loaded into it, etc. So it's like, it's not doing like a seed, but it's actually simulating on that seed. And that's an idea that makes sense for MMOs, but I don't know if it makes sense for single player gaming at all. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oliver?
Yeah, I think there are a few concepts here that would be really interesting. You could have like large language model powered AI systems in terms of what you do in the cloud, large language model powered AI systems for dialogue generation, story generation, maybe even just like flavor text, but also you could set up systems where you basically tell the AI, you prompt it with prompts that basically are like, okay, so, respond to the player in idle conversation. Then after a few responses, you get to the meat of the conversation, which is this topic, and engage with the player in a friendly way. Like there are all kinds of ways that you can script this that are interesting. Other game content, potentially, other content, graphics, art, things like this without creating load or memory issues on the console itself, right? Which could be quite severe. In terms of how you'd scale this, I think one answer to that would basically be that Microsoft has access to an enormous amount of server hardware, and they would simply scale up and scale down load depending on demand. But like they have H100s that can run anything, it doesn't need to be game specific necessarily. So I think it's not an easy problem to solve, but they could use generalized server capacity, which presumably would be quite capacious, right, on their end. They could obviously do physics with some latency to it that might be a little bit of a problem for real-time physics in games, but for like larger scale destruction, I'm sure it would work great. Crackdown obviously demonstrated that. We never actually saw that in the shipping title, which is maybe notable. But I think importantly, from my perspective, I don't think there are a ton of concepts that couldn't be done pretty effectively on existing console hardware. I don't think you need anything too special to do this stuff, except maybe you want more predictive stuff on the client side that would require some specialized hardware in next generation consoles. But I suspect that most of these concepts you could actually iterate on local hardware.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just, the more I think about it, the more I just go back and look at that article and see that just the bandwidth limitation is still there, right? It doesn't really matter if you've got a gigabit internet connection, you've still got latency to the cloud server. It's just, what if you've got, somebody else in your house using the internet heavily at the same time, and it sort of hammers your game performance. Not everyone has gigabit internet. There's so many potential failure points. This is the thing about what's great about the console, right? It's a fixed hardware platform. Its outputs are entirely deterministic because every machine is exactly the same, right? But when you start adding in variables where the developer has no control, all hell can break loose. I still don't think that we're at this position yet where you can rely 100% on an internet connection for a game experience. And I'm just kind of surprised that it would be sort of wheeled out as a brand new concept for a 2028 console mm-hmm. when much was made of this back on Xbox One and just nothing ever happened. And I suspect it didn't happen because just because of all of these different potential failure points. I don't know. I'd really like to know what the pitch is. That's the thing about the leaked PDFs, right? You just saw, a presentation. You didn't get any deep dives into how they're actually going to be doing it or what they're actually doing. That's the other thing. You don't really know what they're doing. Really interesting stuff.
Given the timescales here, I think they would need to wheel out a game that's already doing it by around launch time to even make it like a selling point, right? Like here, Xbox Series X launched and had like no exclusive games for an eternity, and they sold it on these certain premises at least. But for that is such a big premise to sell on. They would really need to have games already in development now that are looking to use these things.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that right? Exactly they would start now, like 5-6 years of development time easily. So,
isn't that exactly what Hideo Kojima is doing? He's doing a cloud-based Xbox project.
Wow, that's a good point.
So maybe this is some kind of showcase of what this new console will do. Maybe how long it takes Kojima to make a game.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Or maybe simply, there's no reason. I don't see any reason why an Xbox Series X couldn't be a similar sort of hybrid cloud compute thing to just doesn't really sort of all add up to me. But I guess maybe this Kojima game could be quite interesting. It could actually maybe show the way.